Hello, everyone, and welcome to this art journalism course. I'm kind of revamping things. I'm re recording a couple of these videos from what I did last year, with the goal being that these videos will kind of live on, and that every year my journalism students will be able to watch these and not have to attend a class at the last period of the day if they keep uh, scheduling it that way. If you are not in my class and you're just learning about journalism, welcome. We're going to talk about some things, some assignments that won't matter to you, but hopefully you'll get a little bit of an idea about what is going on in this journalism course. If you are in my class, though, I'm going to go through every assignment that we have, every quiz that we have, and explain what's on it, what's in the unit, how to help you get through the unit the best way you can. Okay, so the content uses this term that I don't really love called backpack journalism. And the only thing that backpack journalism really is using everything at your disposal to tell stories. One of the reasons why I am not a journalist sitting here today and I'm a teacher is because with the advent of the internet and technology and everything and how quickly things have progressed, anyone can be a journalist. Any of you right now, if you saw a story happening, could be a journalist. You could take the video, you could take the audio, you could interview people, you could type up the story, you could send it off to whomever, all from your phone or all from someplace with internet, right? If you didn't have signal, so it is still a commitment to honor the truth, be as accurate as possible in your reporting and writing, but you can do it all in the palm of your hand or, with the stuff at your disposal. You don't have to be a journalist with all sorts of formal training and all sorts. That doesn't exist anymore. Why does journalism matter? Well, a free press is responsible for defining what is newsworthy. That right is protected by the Constitution. It's our First Amendment right to have a free press. But what is free? How do we define the news? Who defines what the news is? And what about nations that don't have that freedom? That's what we look at when we look at journalism. We look at what is a free press, and then what we kind of go through the what would happen if that free press was diminished. And spoiler alert, it sometimes is already. Sometimes that free press is squashed through various means, both legal and not. So what do we? But what about nations and countries and world and the parts of the world that don't have that freedom of free press? What is news, right? This is one of those things that we constantly look at. If you watch the news or if you pay attention, the news will be something like, it'll be like a viral video you saw on TikTok three weeks ago, right? They'll be talking about there was a dog that went surfing, something like that, whatever. Um, but and you're like, this isn't news. Well, what is news? It's new, it's recent, it's new in some case, it's significant and useful most of the time, or it's a combination of entertaining, informative, and more. Why does journalism matter? Well, it's critical to our democracy. Journalism is one of those things that usually keeps world leaders, politicians, businesses in check. Journalism investigates those things because it doesn't have necessarily a corporate entity telling it, you can't do this, you can do this, right? It ensures that we have an uncensored information to guide our decisions, our purchasing decisions, our voting decisions, our everyday lives. That is what journalism is there for, to give us, without any opinion or without any slant or bias, give us uncensored information to guide our day-to-day lives. These news values, these 6 news values that are up here on the screen right now, super important because these news values keep showing up in our course all throughout. So pay attention to these. We will obviously keep reminding you of these, but pay attention to them. So imagine this scene. You're driving and you witness a fender bender. Is that newsworthy? No. You couldn't walk into a news station and go, stop the presses. I just saw an accident. Well, what kind of accident? A car ran into another. Is anyone hurt? No. Did traffic stop? No. Did, was there even any damage? Not really. That's not news. But what if the driver is a 10-year-old boy who borrowed his mom's car? Now we have a news story. So we have 6 news values that kind of help us declare or decide if something is newsworthy. Timeliness. Did it happen very, very recently? Right? Proximity. Did it happen close to the audience or does it immediately affect the audience that this, publication, news station, whatever is going is aiming at? Prominence. Does it involve someone or something super powerful or important, or high up in the chain of command. Impact, what's the effect on the audience? Conflict, are two countries at war, are two entities at war? Conflict always makes for a story. Or novelty, the 10-year-old boy who borrowed his mom's car, that's a novelty thing. Stories about zoo animals, those viral videos on TikTok, those are novelty most of the time, right? So again, it's got to have hopefully all or a combination of those news values in order to make it newsworthy. So let's talk about each of these situations, what value makes it newsworthy. France declares war on Spain. That's immediately a conflict, right? There's also bigger impacts, but if you're sitting here in Indiana, that maybe doesn't affect you as much as it's just a conflict and the world should know about it. A water main breaks in town. That's an impact. It's going and proximity, right? It's going to affect the town. You're going to be on a boil order. You're not going to have water for a while. The president of the United States hits a tree while riding his bike. Prominence, right? That's a very important person who had an accident. Now he's probably fine, it was whatever, but it's about prominence, so therefore it gets news coverage. A tornado watch has been issued for the next 45 minutes. Proximity and timeliness. This is something that we need right away, and it's something that the people in this area need to know immediately. A 7.4 earthquake hit Southern California, injuring hundreds and destroying homes. That's impact. It impacts hundreds, probably thousands of people. It's a big deal. It's also novelty. We don't get that many earthquakes in the US of that magnitude, so it would be newsworthy there. And then a gorilla at the National Zoo lost its mate and is grief stricken. That's novelty, right? Again, zoo animals, kids, always novelty stories. Be sure to look in your lesson, be sure to look at the timeline of the news. I'm not going to sit here and go through all of it, but it goes through all the way from Johann Gutenberg inventing the movable type printing press all the way to modern day internet journalism and everything in between. A couple of things to point out. The 50s and 60s are kind of this era of news where television becomes ubiquitous, goes in everyone's homes. And there are these trusted newsmen of the 50s and 60s. They're in your home every night giving you the truth. Whether it's Walter Cronkite, whether it's David Brinkley, those were the kind of the two main ones, right? The Brinkley Huntley report. You are sitting down with the same person and they are giving you the unvarnished, no opinion information of the day. So this happens in the 50s and 60s and really solidifies the relationship of the news for tons of people moving forward, an entire generation moving forward. There's also this idea of yellow journalism happening kind of a little bit before in the 40s, but in the 50s and 60s as well, where newspapers start to get bought up by corporations. And there are two main corporations. There's William Randolph Hearst and I'm going to blank. I was trying to pull the second one and I couldn't do it. But there are these two giant corporations buying up most of the newspapers or starting the newspapers in major cities all across the US. And what they start to do is use the newspapers against the other side. So it's like the Chicago-owned newspaper by Hearst is going to attack the Chicago-owned newspaper by the other guy, right? So they're going to do this yellow journalism where it's journalism and it's not necessarily lying, but it's got a really weird bias to it. And this starts kind of like the blurring of fact and opinion, which happens today. You can't necessarily just watch the news anymore, and you also can't necessarily watch sports anymore. If some of you are interested in sports journalism, we're going to talk about it off and on throughout the semester. But if you watch ESPN now, you get a score and then you get all of this opinion on what that score means and the storylines and stuff. When back in my day when I was a kid, we just got the scores and that was it. We didn't have all this opinion filling the air, but that is now kind of where we are. It's important to note some African American press moments in the U.S. In 1827, Freedom's Journal is established. This is the first known African American newspaper of the time. I believe it's a weekly. 37 years later, the first African American daily newspaper is formed. Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells keep pushing the envelope for more African Americans in journalism, in prominent roles in journalism, investigating issues that are important to the African American society. Watergate in the 1970s is journalism's big rock star moment. So in 1972, there's a burglary at the Democratic National Committee's headquarters in the Watergate office complex. It is, to put it mildly, the worst burglary ever committed. It makes no sense. There are mistakes all over the place, and eventually some folks get caught for it. Two reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, start investigating, and they end up figuring out that the burglary at the offices was coordinated by a committee trying to elect Richard Nixon. And as they keep investigating and as they keep digging and as they keep poking and trials start, it keeps growing, this conspiracy of doing illegal things in order to try to get either information on Nixon's enemies or to try to get Nixon reelected however they can. The weird part about Watergate, Nixon was going to get reelected anyway. The polls all showed that Nixon was leading well in advance of his opponent, but it didn't matter. They didn't care. They were so paranoid about all of the people who disagreed with them that they went to so many illegal means in order to secure that election. There were hearings on TV. Nixon gets reelected anyway in 72, swears in 73, but by 1974 he has to resign because the criminal charges just keep mounting and mounting and mounting against him to the point where he can't he has to resign, or else he's going to get impeached and lose his job anyway. But this is journalism's rock star moment because journalists broke the story. Journalists dug and dug and dug and dug and got sources and put the pieces together and followed the money in order to break the whole story. Your 1.02 quiz is on the value of the news. It asks you about news values with given examples. It asks excuse me. It asks you about Watergate. It's 5 multiple choice questions. You get 10 attempts. Your 1.03 journalist reflection. A lot of you have been emailing me this year in 2024 about these journal reflection, reporters reflection things. So let's talk about them. You're going to go to the link in the 1.03 lesson and choose an article involving FDR, JFK, Ford, or Reagan. Post the link and write a sentence of each news value the story includes, at least 2. So there's a link if you click on 1.03 and go through the pages, it'll give you a link, and it's going to tell you to pick a story involving Franklin Delano Roosevelt, JFK, President Ford, or President Reagan. You're going to read that story, and then you're going to write a sentence of each news value those stories include. So you need the link and a sentence about each news value the story has. Again, prominence is pretty standard. Prominence, location, proximity, timeliness, whatever, novelty, whatever, right? Your reflection number 2, 1.04, is about the press and the presidency now. You're going to find an article about our current president, which right now in 2024 is President Biden. I don't know what it will be next year when I teach this class again, but right now it's President Biden. You're going to find an article about the current president from the last 2 months. Okay. Identify at least 2 of the news values, of the 5 news values. We're assuming prominence is in there, so focus on the other 5. Write a sentence for each one that you ID and how it meets that value. So you need a link, a list of the values, and a sentence for each one. Okay. So again, and that's about a recent within the past 2 months article. So first one, you're going to the past. Second one, you're going to the recent. Now, in your 1.05 discussion, you're going to take those 2 articles, the one you grabbed for the first reflection, the one you grabbed for the second. You're going to write a discussion post about whether the language used in the news stories has changed over time. Has the definition of news changed? Would this story from 2024 or late 2023 not get printed back in the 60s or 70s or 80s, depending on which president you chose? Has what passes as fact changed? Is the presentation different? Are there photos? Is there anything interactive in the more modern article? What is each story's source, and are there similarities or differences between the sources in those 2 articles? So 20 points for posting everything that I asked for there. If you don't have to reply to your classmates, but if you want to, you certainly can. So again, it's a discussion post lining, all of that information. The medium and the message, hard or soft news, doesn't matter where you see it. What's the difference between print and video and radio and online? Well, it really just depends, right? Um, your 1.07 quiz talks about the genres of journalism. Hard news is going to be like the really serious stuff, and soft news is going to be sports and lifestyle and movie reviews and things like that. It's Again, those are also getting blurrier, right? Like, we don't have as much hard and soft news. We definitely have more serious and lighter stories, though. So 1.07 quiz is talking about the genres of journalism. It's talking about the purposes of press releases. Press releases is that companies put out in order for news publications to print their articles. It talks about op-eds, opinion pieces or editorials, and newsworthiness in general. So hard news is going to be local, international, national, analytical, business, finance stuff. Soft news is going to be features, right? Talking about the old librarian who's been at the library for 60 years, profiles, editorials, sports, humor, all of the games section, the comics, those are all the soft news sections of things. Your reporter's reflection 3, how do you best tell a story? You're going to choose a story that's covered in two different ways. So online, print, or radio. So again, I know everything's probably going to be online, but go with like a traditionally print source, a traditionally online source. If you're having trouble with those sources, let me know. I can help kind of bridge those gaps a little bit. Using what we've learned so far, consider just one of the news values that is emphasized or not in each story because of the media you use. So you need the links to each story and a paragraph comparing and contrasting the news values that are kind of featured or not because of the medium used. Okay. So again, what is different? What makes news different online than in print, than an NPR story, than a TikTok, whatever, right? And then reflection 4, you're going to watch a video of a TV news report. It can be on TV or online, but it should be the full story and not just the clip. So my advice is to go to a TV station's website and watch the story there because you're going to get the whole thing. If you can't sit down and watch the news one night, that is your best way to do that. And it can be NBC, it can be a local NBC or CBS, whatever, right? But you're going to watch a TV news report, take notes on the visuals that the story uses. So it's not always just person talking, right? They show other things while people are talking. That's what we call B roll. So it's A roll is, excuse me, A roll is the reporter talking, the witness talking, B roll is whatever is going on as they're talking that isn't video of them talking. So I need the link to the story that you use, and then a paragraph describing the visuals used, a paragraph imagining how you would tell the story without the visuals, and a paragraph exploring how producing the piece for radio, where you don't have any visuals, as opposed to visual media, might change the article at all. And when I say paragraph, a couple sentences is fine. Good luck. Check your to-do list that's on your course page. That's all for Unit 1. We got it done in 18 minutes instead of multiple weeks of classes. So, good luck. Please email if you have any questions. I hope that explains the reflections a bit more. And I will see you all for Unit 2 in a week or so.